I can't believe you're doing that just in 3 weeks.
I think just growing up, I've always been entrepreneurial because of my family. We have this thing called the hustle spirit. Hey, it feels like an episode of Black Mirror, but a lot of these, innovative technologies, I think they've come to mainstream at times by accident. And so, yeah, it's quite interesting, talking to customers about that and infusing AI into that.
I really love that. And I think it's great, honestly.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Venture Ahead, the only podcast at our university that tells you what it means to be an entrepreneur. Each episode, we bring you the best advice from the people living it, CEOs, founders, and change makers shaping the future. Today, we have here with us Folajimi Daodu. He's the founder of both Hill and Saifra Events. Thank you so much for being here today.
No, thanks for having me.
Of course. And I'm going to ask with the one question that we ask all of our guests this season, which is, what's one habit that you never skip?
Prayer.
Nice.
Yeah. I try not to skip it. So prayer for me is just talking to God, to Jesus, and, mapping out, my day every day. So that is one habit for me I don't skip. Well, I wouldn't call it a habit. It's a lifestyle now. It's something I do every day. So I think for me, that's one thing I always do.
I love that. That's super insightful, actually.
Outside of that, going to the gym or doing something physical to help with my mental wellness and physical well-being. I feel like as an entrepreneur, we are not working 24/7. I'd say 25/7 if there's anything like that. And for me, it's just important to balance mentally a lot of things, family, work, business, relationships, friendships, and all of that. So I think being in a good physical shape, is also one thing that I try not to miss. I went to the gym this morning.
I agree totally. As an entrepreneur, entrepreneurs have a lot going on in their companies, and there's a lot of information about how entrepreneurs don't have time. So it's super important to make sure that you have time for the things that really matter to you, like your prayer and going to the gym every day.
Absolutely.
So thank you for sharing that. Now I want to go back a little bit to your beginning.
Oh boy.
So you're from Lagos, Nigeria, right?
Correct.
Okay. So you started there, and now you're leading all the kind of tech initiatives all across Africa and the Middle East.
Correct.
So that's quite the journey. What early experiences or influences led you in this path of leadership, and what spiked your interest in technology and innovation?
Interesting. How do I even start this? So, born and bred in Lagos, Nigeria, grew up in a small part of Lagos called Ogba. I think just growing up, I've always been entrepreneurial because of my family. My dad had always had a number of multiple businesses run at the same time. So I think that kind of grew on me as well. And I think just being Nigerian as well, we have this thing called the hustle spirit, right? Where we just have to do more. I don't know what we're trying to prove, I kid you not, but it's just imbibed in us to do a whole lot more than just a day job, right? And I think the story goes back to what actually hit me. So I did a first degree in computer science in Babcock University. And I was fortunate enough, and I thank God for this, that my parents had the resources to send me to the UK to do a master's. And it was funny because while I did computer science, right, I always wanted to be a banker because I liked wearing ties and suits. And I was like, oh man, this is going to be so cool. And I applied to international finance, business, and all of that. And I did a spreadsheet with the cost of the tuition. And I had a conversation with my dad to say, hey, these are the top universities. I have a conditional offer. And he looked at it and he goes, I can't see anything computer science. And I go, yeah, I already have a first degree in that. I don't want to do a master's in that. And he goes, oh, okay. If you want to go do business, then you pay for it yourself. And at the time, I didn't have 30-something thousand pounds to send myself to the UK. So fortunately, there was still time for me to apply. So I applied for software engineering, advanced computing. I did get a conditional offer to the University of Scotland, where the future King of England went to.
Wow.
But I didn't go there because I just felt it was too cold. So I went to University of Bristol. I did advanced computing. And I think for me, that journey or that, how do I put it? My dad getting me to do a master's in computing or in computer science, I think that shaped it. Because I feel like if I'd done business, if I had done finance, my career trajectory would have been a bit different. And from that, luckily finished the masters. I finished with a pass, not a merit or a distinction. I was like, oh man, daddy paid a lot of money. Hey, at least I got the degree, right? And
Absolutely.
a part of me was like, I didn't want to write code, right? And I was like, okay, let's look at what a career path would look like, right? And I was like, okay, let me go work in corporate, let me hone my skills and figure it out from there, right? And started working in corporate and I kind of enjoyed it, but I went down the project management part, right, and transformation. So I'm the guy to give, $5-10 million. I spin up a team, deliver a project 2 to 3 years. It's always different, right? So I did that in hospitality. I did that in technology. I eventually did that in banking. So I did get to wear my tie and suits. And, I worked at Barclays. I worked at RBS. I was fortunate enough. And I was like, yeah, this is not it, man. And then I never worked trainers. So while my journey was in corporate, I got introduced to the startup ecosystem and entrepreneurship. And while I was doing that, I was still hustling, right? Take it back to the university. I shouldn't be saying this but hey, I already have my degree certificate. So I went to a 7-day Adventist university in Nigeria called Babcock, and you eat, I think it was vegetarian. You eat tofu, no fish, no meat, and all of that. But while in university, I was able to source grilled turkey, sell, market, make a profit,
Wow.
and not get caught. If I got caught, I'll have been expelled. So technically, it was like dealing drugs on campus, but just in the virtual food. So
crazy.
I've always just had that entrepreneurial, flow, right? And that took me to set up Vault Hill with a few folks and, materialize to where we are today. And for me, it's, I thank God for the journey. It's not been easy. It has its up and downs, but, I'm enjoying every step of it. I mean, by virtue of being in the entrepreneurship world, I got to meet His Majesty, the King, yesterday. So, hey, why not?
That's crazy. I was going to say, Steve Jobs always said that when you look back, all the dots kind of like come together.
It actually does.
And I can completely see it with what you have just told us with your journey. And now, actually, I want to dive deeper into that, especially into Vault Hill, your company. I'm more specifically into Hilda, which is part of your product offering, which is an AI-powered business companion that aims to redefine how business operate. So which gaps in the market did you find that led to its development, and how does it address them in practice?
Hey, Hilda, oh my God. Hilda was born out of desperation, I kid you not, right? So when we started Vault Hill 2021, it was out of, again, take it back to 2018, 2019, right?
Yes.
It was a Christmas party at Barclays, and a colleague of mine was talking to me about Bitcoin, right?
Wow.
And I was like, someone else told me about the UK stock market like a year and a half ago. I put some money and I lost some money. So when this guy was telling me about Bitcoin, I was like, what the F is this, right? Pardon my French. And I was like, okay, let me go check it out, right? And while I was doing my research, I found XRP and virtual land. So XRP is Ripple. So it's one of the only cryptocurrencies at the time I felt had a good use case, which was cross-border payments, right? Again, being Nigerian, sending money back home, it felt like a Western Union MoneyGram type thing. So I was like, hey, got invested. I got invested so much, I went on eBay, I bought a mug and a shirt and I was promoting it. I got my wife to buy it at $3. And if anyone's following XRP, they know that, geez, man, that was a huge loss. She still hasn't forgiven me. But fast forward to virtual land. I found virtual land, bought a couple for about $200 back in 2018. And fast forward 2021, I sold one of those $200 pieces of land for $10,000. I first thought it was a scam until I walked through the process, got the money in my bank account, withdrew cash from an ATM, and actually give my wife some of that money and go, hey, you know what? I know you made a loss, but hey, here you go. And for me, it was interesting to say, who's buying virtual land? Who's making virtual land? what are they using virtual land for? So I got to research that and found out at the time it was just gaming. So we put together a small research team, myself, Nick, and a couple of others, just understanding what this was about and, how do we leverage the blockchain? How do we then use this for real estate, right? So that was how Vault Hill was set up. And the name comes from Vault is secure, and we're going on the blockchain. So we're like trying to get a nice word and frame for the company. And then the hill comes from, at the time, I was living on a development called Castle Hill. I didn't just take it from the hill there, but the hill is an advantageous position in warfare, right? So it's almost like secure advantage, Vault Hill, right? So that's how the name came about. And, fast forward, we started talking to real estate companies, trying to get them to visualize how you could sell through the virtual reality and virtual world, properties. Because there was a time my wife and I were looking to buy a house, and the house type we wanted to get wasn't at the showroom. So that also sparked the interest of, hey, imagine being at a showroom and popping into virtual reality and literally walking into the house you want to buy and then customizing it. If you go into the kitchen, you want it blue, red, whatever it is, and seeing that transformation. So we were onto something then. And when we started, there was a lot of education we had to do. And then a few months later, Facebook turned their name to Meta. And then it was all about the metaverse. And people were like, oh, Jimmy, you're building the metaverse. Oh my God, you're doing this, you're doing that. I was like, I've been telling you guys since, yes. So yeah, that was the turnover, and that got us there. However, I wouldn't call it the hype, but the technology kind of faded after a year or two. The rise of AI came, ChatGPT came, and as a startup, resilience is in our DNA. So we quickly pivoted. We had a collaborative partnership with Meta AI. We spun up Hilda as a product. Again, we got a little bit of traction, but the chatbot industry just got really saturated as well.
Yeah.
So again, we had to think on our feet, and now we're building an event management platform with AI to help event organizers like, South Summit and the guys and the likes, but also infusing that with a speaker passport, where if I'm a speaker, I speak on a number of events, I could literally have a dashboard and a tracker to show all the events that I attend throughout the year and, what are my KPIs and objectives. Because yes, people attend events, they post that on LinkedIn, but there isn't a place where people track it. I mean, I do have a spreadsheet, but I could do some type of innovation. And then there's something called Speaker Compass we're building for organizations where, if you take an example of Google, right? You have about 5,000 employees that speak at 5,000 executives that speak at a number of events. Now, how do you track how many people are speaking? So Google is quite big. You could have Leap in Saudi Arabia invite, the head of robotics in San Francisco, the head of climate change in Johannesburg, and someone from London. But the whole organization don't know 3 people from Google at that event. So again, creating transparency for organizations to see where their executives are speaking as well. So it's a 3-part ecosystem we're building. So yeah, it's quite interesting, talking to customers about that and infusing AI into that.
I really love that. And I think it's great, honestly.
Thank you.
And I love that you mentioned everything about pivoting. There's these statistics that goes around that says 90% of startups fail. And I do feel like they fail because people aren't resilient enough. They see that it doesn't work and they give up.
Absolutely.
And the core of startup is like just pivot all the time until you get to product market fit.
Exactly.
Now that we're in the topic of startups, I want to ask you now about Safira Events.
Yep.
So you're helping build real bridges between Africa and the Middle East, tech worlds, through this startup. So from your point of view, what connects these two ecosystems? And what kind of opportunities do you think it opens up when we connect them?
Nah, absolutely. I think, you touched on it, right, about the pivot and resilience. And I've been fortunate enough to get invited to a number of events to speak at, right? So as a speaker, I kind of see some of the challenges event organizers have. A lot of them, I built relationships with where they go, hey, Jimmy, I'm looking for a speaker to talk on this panel, or could you help me create this? And from a non-transactional perspective, I offer to help. So I've kind of built a little bit of reputation or relationship within some certain key event organizers and their teams, right? And back last year in November, I got invited to speak at an event in Saudi Arabia called BBAN, and the guys that invited me, specifically Saeed, invited me to another event in December called Saudi Manuscript, and I brought the Nigerian embassy to that event, and I brought a few
Wow.
people, right? And it was interesting for me because I was like, okay. This is a different event. It didn't have to do with technology, but they invited me here. So I was like, okay, grateful for that invitation. And then at that event, they were like, oh, there's another event in 2 weeks. Do you want to come out for that? I'm like, no, guys. It's my son's birthday. I'm going out to Lagos and, we're going to have a good time. And they're like, hey, we'll fly you to Lagos and bring you back. And
Wow.
it dawned on me, I'm like, wow, exactly my words. And, that happened. I came back and it got me to have a conversation with Saeed to say, hey, what are the gaps in the event industry, right? Especially in the Middle East, and how do we solve some of that? And part of the challenges was just operational inefficiency, spreadsheets, lack of coordination, lack of communication, and all of that, right? And that got us to spin off Safira. And while I was doing that, I was deeply in conversations with, Nigeria and Africa ecosystem, and I've lived in Dubai for about 3 years now, and now I live in Saudi. So for me, it was how do I give back to Africa, but also how do I enrich where I am as well? And I think it just dawned on me to connect Africa and the Middle East, and that was the birth of Safira. So we launched Safira at Leap through a side event where we had about 80 to 100 CEOs, government delegates, diplomats come through. It was an experience. We literally had jollof rice in Riyadh, which is a Nigerian dish, and everyone was like, "What?" We had Arabic calligraphy, so people were writing, their kids' names, their significant others' names in Arabic. We had an art exhibition. So the idea of Safira Evenings for us was, while you have all the networking going on at, these conferences, just come and unwind, come and just chill. Yes, you could still network, but come and have a different experience that is semi-formal, informal, right? And that was how that came up. And by virtue of that, we got talking with Dubai Future Foundation, and they wanted us to bring in a Nigerian delegation to Dubai AI Week in April, which we did. So again, it's literally just been unfolding one event at a time. We have Money 2020 in Riyadh. We have BBAN in Riyadh as well later this year. So I think for me, the opportunity here is not just, how do we create a platform for African talent, African speakers on a global stage, but it's also how do we drive economic value? How do we look at job creations? How do we look at impact from a social economic perspective, and then, play our part in those ways?
Very impressive.
Thank you.
No, honestly, I love how you have told us how you created like both of your companies and the background to it. I love hearing all of these kind of stories. I find them super interesting.
Thank you.
But now let's look a little bit more towards the future.
Yeah.
So you're super into tech.
Because of my dad.
No, yeah, true. But then, the doubts, if that hadn't been that way, maybe you wouldn't be here today.
Yeah, I think I'll probably be a VC or an investment banker or something, I think.
So let's talk now about the future. Which emerging technologies are you most excited about? And what do you think will be shaping the future in the next years?
No, thanks for that. I know everyone's talking about AI now. I think AI is a fundamental technology and innovation that will shape the way we interact, the way we build relationships, the way we do things. It's already changing that right now. It's already disrupting industries and businesses. I think quantum computing is big as well.
Yes.
No one's really, people are talking about it, but I think it's still a little bit technical, like how AI was a few years ago. Not until the advent of ChatGPT, where with a data connection and a smartphone, or a data connection and a laptop, you could literally access, a whole billion parameters of how to do things better. I think once we decipher the technological jargons with quantum computing and make it as easy as possible for people to understand, I think that would get a lot of mass adoption. I think robotics is another interesting one. We started seeing, like I was saying to you earlier, the King, His Majesty King Felipe was at the Mobile World Congress, and he gave a handshake to an AI robot. So Imagine having an AI robot in your house, helping you with your chores. Hey, it feels like an episode of Black Mirror, but
It does. No, absolutely.
we might get there. We will get there. So I guess it's, how do we ensure the safety nets around it? And lastly, I'd say space exploration. Elon Musk and co are already going into Mars, and, there's already an international space station where a couple of countries are already docking their flags. So I think it's important to look at all of this, but understand, how does humanity come into this, right? How do we ensure that we're still very empathetic with all of these innovations and technologies, right? I keep hearing that the next set of, hopefully we don't have this, but the next set of wars are going to be data-driven or technological-driven wars rather than, boots on the ground. So for us is, how do we keep safeguards? How do we ensure regulations and policies are doing the best to make sure that there's a framework of how we do this as well?
Absolutely. No, it's especially hard nowadays. We can see with AI all the time, everyone, it's like there's a lot of gray spaces into how to regulate it. And it actually affects way more things than people think.
Trust me. There are times where I try not to go on LinkedIn so much because I follow a number of people, and I'm in also some WhatsApp groups where it's all just techie stuff. And I have 2 kids. Sammy is turning 9 in December and Steffi is turning 7 next month. And I call them the iPad kids. And I kid you not, I do homework with them. And my daughter is like, she's doing a division or a multiplication, and she first goes on the calculator and goes, "Hey, Daddy, I know it." And I'm like, "Hey, man, you need to use your head." But a part of me goes, you know what? It's all right to use a calculator. It's all right to ask AI, but how do you ensure that you understand how to problem solve?
Yeah.
So it's accepting there's technology for that, but it's now, how do you channel their insights to go, yes, I could do 5 times 5 on a calculator to get me 25, but how do I apply, 5 things by 5 things to solve a problem? So I think it's now changing how we learn, So for me, it's a bit scary to see how much they have access to and how much, again, building behind the scenes, how much there is going on behind the scenes. And I'm like, geez, like when these guys are 12, 13, 18, it's going to be a different ball game. So I pray to God every day to give us the insights to, how do we manage kids with this type of technology as well?
Absolutely, yeah. How do they learn to use it as a tool and not as the ultimate solution?
Exactly.
Talking about solutions. Something that I loved about this podcast is how you talk about like solving all these different problems.
Yeah.
How you told that, I found this problem and I wanted to solve it. Because nowadays, everyone, it's very much getting on the wave of trends. And that's about like all these startups right now are about getting into the trends, but you seem to be real focused on solving real problems. What's your process for identifying these needs before they become the next big thing?
So it's a catch-22, right? You have billions of dollars being spent on research and development, research and innovation. And a lot of these, innovative technologies, I think they've come to mainstream at times by accident, right? At times it's always shaped by a policy or legislation with the government lobbying and ensuring that, some type of policy comes in that aids innovation, right? I think for me, part of the lessons from the metaverse to what we're doing now is just understanding and speaking to customers. So with the metaverse, it was a business to customer, product, right? And part of it was we're trying to differentiate by, using a virtual reality headset. However, the challenge is the price point for a virtual reality headset is about $350. And that ranges to the Apple Vision Pro, which is, $2,500, right? So it's almost like if I take this back to Africa, the minimum wage is about $100 to $200 a month. So how do I get someone on a minimum wage to buy a product that is twice their minimum wage, So again, the accessibility and the innovation is always the challenge. And it's always, is that a paracetamol problem or is that a vitamin C problem, right? And that then gets us to understanding, okay, we need to keep talking to the customers. We need to look at how we use a model which could either be a business to business to a customer route, or we do a business to business, right? Now, the sales cycle during a business to business is much longer than a business to customer route, right? And for us with Stage OS, Stage Compass, and Speaker Passport, Literally, we spoke to, I think, about 20 to 30 customers and categorized their challenges before we wrote a single line of code. And
Wow.
with AI now, there are a lot of platforms that can get your application up in literally hours, right? Gone are the days where you need a team of 6 people, 6 developers to write, build something. Like literally with ChatGPT, Lovable, UX Pilot, and all of that, you could literally create platforms or create products quite quickly. So for us, what we did was we spoke to customers. I kid you not, literally on Monday, I was having a conversation with Hamad, who is the Chief Experience Officer at Etihad Credit Bureau. And he comes from a design thinking background, and we're having a conversation about StageOS, and I was trying to get his insights from a design thinking perspective. And while we were having that conversation, he goes, Jimmy, one problem I have a number of resources in my organization that have different events and I can't track them. If you build something like that, I'll pay and use it. I kid you not. I went straight to my team. We prototyped it. We're shipping it next week.
Wow.
So for me, that's the
super
speed,
impressive.
right? Where you validate an idea with a customer. You talk to other customers as well, but it is a sheer need that everyone thinks about, right? Whether we make that a free product or we put some money on it, question mark. But the idea is you talk to a customer, you validate a problem, and you solve for that problem rather than just saying, hey, build it and it'll come. I think that's already dead now. You have to talk to customers and understand, one, what are their pain points? How do you use technology to solve for that? And then, their eagerness and willingness to pay for it.
I can't believe you're doing that just in 3 weeks.
No, less than 3 weeks. This was Monday. Today's
Well,
Thursday.
yeah, true. No, 2 weeks. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. Thank you so much for everything, really. It was like a super insightful conversation. Before we move to the last part of the podcast, I want to ask you just one last question.
Okay.
More entrepreneurship related.
Okay.
If you could have a coffee with any founder or person, dead or alive, who will it be?
Whoa. Shoot, man. I need to think about it. It's not Elon, it's not Steve, it's not Mark. I think it'll be a cohort of founders trying to figure stuff out and go, guys, I've made X number of mistakes that have cost X number of million of dollars. Don't do this. Right?
Yes.
So I feel like I'd rather spend my time sharing my learnings, not mistakes, with people in the same boat or people trying to figure stuff out. Even up to the part where, litigation, for example, getting sued or taken to court by an employee, how do you navigate that? That is stuff that I've been through and, done and dusted, right? So it's how do you share that experience with people so they don't make that experience, right? I think from a learning perspective, I don't know. I know what your question is asking, but I can't just, there isn't anyone
okay.
that can go, hey, I really want to have even like Warren Buffett, I'm like, I don't know. I feel like it's too old school. I feel like I would benefit from learning from folks younger than me. And, but I don't know whose name I can call. But I think I could just generalize it to say, hey, personally, I would want to learn from folks younger than me and understand how they think about problem solving and how they solve problems and use that to, create more impact with my own day-to-day as well.
That's the perfect example of entrepreneurs help entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
So, okay, next section. It's called the Pitch Doctor. So basically,
the what?
Pitch Doctor.
Right, okay.
So I'm going to pitch you a startup from an AI student. And we just want to know your insights. Would you invest? Would you use it? Would you pivot it?
Okay.
So, okay.
Kind of feels like I'm a startup judge now. Okay, let's go.
A Shark Tank.
Ooh.
So it's called Eco City. It's a platform that lets founders simulate how their startup will perform in different Africa and Middle East markets. Using AI, local data, and cultural insights to build mirror markets in real time.
Wow, okay. There's a lot of buzzwords there. But I think, let's drop it to a layman's perspective. How would that help, the average mother going to work? Or average single mom with 2 kids going to work. I think for me, it's understanding that impact at that level. Like high level, it sounds innovative, right? But I think, let's work through the psychology of the product or the tool, and let's understand, what's the target customer? Let's understand who's the target user as well, right? Before we talk about funding or investment. I think if we're able to nail that down in terms of who's going to use this, who's going to pay for this, and how much impact is it going to create, I think if we're able to solve for that or talk through that, it's an investable product or investable application, platform, or service. I think it's one that I would look at and go, okay, hey, let's have a next level conversation. It's not one I'll ring the bell and do. I think this is one that, because, smart cities and all of that are, coming up, how do we do things in a very sustainable way?
Yeah.
I think it's one that appeals as well, but we need to just move away from the buzzwords and go, hey, let's strip it down to detail and understand, what they're trying to do.
At the end of the day, they help, a lot of solutions don't get to many places in the world because the scale-ups aren't able to bring it to other places because of cultural shifts and all that kind of stuff. So I think this is exactly the problem that they are trying to solve. Like, how do we bring more solutions all around the world?
Yeah.
How do we help these scale-ups get their solutions all around the world?
Yeah. No, it's amazing. I'll definitely want to have a next level conversation on what it is and also how I can help. My 2 cents is, try and land enough partnerships and, revenue drivers rather than investors.
Yeah.
Going back to business fundamentals, right? If you spend X, you make Y and your difference is your profit. If it's minus, then you're running at a loss. If it's plus, you're doing well, which is where you need to get to. Those are my 2 cents.
I like it. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you. Had a good time.
Super insightful conversation.
Same here. Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode of Venture Ahead. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And remember, if you're a builder, a dreamer, or just interested in entrepreneurship, stick with us. More stories, more insights, and more bold ideas coming to your way soon. Thank you.